All right, great. So I saw someone was from Tampa. I'm actually a Tampa native, so welcome. All right, so that was really great to see where everyone's from. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We're going to have a good time unpacking these materials and doing some color mixing and learning a little bit about QoR. So I hope it's a good time for you. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. We have our materials specialist, Kathy. You'll see her in the chat answering some technical questions for you. At Golden, we have a crew of materials specialists whose role it is to answer artists' questions about anything, the applications of materials, material behaviors, properties, what would be the best thing for what. We answer those questions, and you can ask anytime at help@goldenpaints.com. It's a great service, and they're always happy to support artists. We hope that we're not just making great paint, but also a resource for you. And Kathy's role is in that department. So know that you can always reach out with any question, never a dumb question. And then we have Todd, who's here helping me as my producer and make sure I stay in line and do the right thing here. So if you hear me say anything to Todd, that's what he's doing. He's our handy producer. He makes me look good. So let's go ahead and get started. I am here in upstate New York at the Golden Factory. Golden Artist Colors makes QoR watercolor, Golden acrylic paints, Williamsburg oils, and pan pastels, all here at our factory in upstate New York. So I think that's pretty neat. We get to see all of that stuff come to be, and that's exciting. We are also an employee-owned company, 100% employee-owned, which is very special. So I just thought you should know a little bit about us before we get going. All right, so order of event for the workshop. I think this will be helpful just to set expectations for you to know what we're going to do. First, we're going to take a look at your materials and just sort of unbox them and look at what they are and get set up for actually our painting. And then we'll pan a couple of colors. We'll take those two tube colors that you have, and actually I'll show you how to put them in the pan and get those into your kit. Then we'll talk a little bit about QoR and why it's different maybe than other watercolor. We'll just introduce you to the brand a little bit and look at maybe some other products that might be helpful. Just a light touch there. We will swatch out your set, which is a lot of fun because that's how you get to know what you're working with. So we'll swatch out the set, and then we'll do some color mixing. I know that our folks at Plaza had passed on some images to you that we'll be mixing to match. I'll have them also on screen. So if you didn't get that or print them out, that's okay, because they'll be on screen. These images that we chose could be painted with this palette fully. So you could get pretty darn close with these. So it should be a lot of fun. If you later want to take this and continue painting, you have that option. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much our day. I'll take questions throughout. And then at the very end, depending on how much time we have, if we have time, I can take requests. So if there's a color that you just really want to see and we didn't go there and you didn't have a chance to play on your own while we're walking through this, I'm happy to help. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing, if you see me look over here, I'm not a superhero. I do have notes. We're going to be together for a little bit, so I don't want to miss anything. Let's go ahead and take a look at our supplies, okay? So Todd, thank you. Okay, wonderful. So I'll give you just a second to get everything in front of you. We're going to take a look first at our tubes. You should have an olive green and a Venetian red. Fun fact, if you see right here, we have our Instagram channel is at Golden Paints. And when you're sharing, we'd love for you to share with Golden as well. Our hashtag is #ShareAtGolden. We do share when we sometimes, it's not a guarantee, but sometimes we do share on our stories, so that's a lot of fun. We love to see what you're doing either way. Today we actually put out a post. Recently we took a trip to Venice, Italy. Golden just between us and the world. Golden Custom Lab actually made the color for the American Pavilion this year at the Venice Biennale. That was by Jeffrey Gibson. It was a beautiful exhibition. And while we were there, we did some mixtures matching actual Venetian reds. So the palette that I used was this exact palette that you have. So if you want to look at our Instagram and see some more mixtures and some more matches, that post went up today. So that's a nice little tie-in for everyone here. Okay, so we have these two tubes. And then you also have these little panels. And as we're going through our color mixtures, we'll test each one of these. You have one that feels a little bit spongy. And if you look at the back, it's called Light Dimensional Ground. It should be labeled on the back with the information. You will also have one that is feels very textured and a little rough. That one is called Cold Press Ground. And these are actually acrylic grounds for watercolor, which we'll talk about more a little later, but they open up a whole host of new possibilities. And this one is watercolor ground. It's just called watercolor ground. And you see it here. So you should have one of each of those. And we also put on the list that you should have some watercolor paper on hand. So if you want to pull about 3 or 4 sheets out of a pad, or, you know, tear some aside because we'll do some mixing on that as well. That would be great. QoR Mini. Let's take a look at this. This is your QoR Mini. This is actually not a sample. This is something you could buy just like this in the store. So it's a really lovely package that you got, and hopefully you'll really enjoy using this. The Urban Sketch Mini is a palette that we designed for landscape that also would mix well for an urban environment where you see a lot of brick and concrete and so on. So we'll explore that. But here's your color. When you flip it over, it gives you a little sneak peek of what's inside. We'll go ahead and open it now if you haven't already. If it was mine, I would have opened it already. We'll do it together here. Put that package aside. And it's got a nice weight. So if you're outside, it's not going to slip off your hand. You can feel it. When you open it up, you have a little color chart. We're going to look at that in a minute. So just put that aside. You also have a swatch card. This is what we'll be painting together in a moment. This little silicone release paper, I actually retain this because I like to be able to reuse it. That's up to you. And then here's our color. Now the palette was designed to have the empties on the sides so that you can build on this palette and customize it, make it your own with the color that you want. We'll add 2 in here today, but you'll still have plenty of space to continue. And again, if you run out of a color, you didn't like that one, you want to put something else there, you can wash it out and reuse those pans. Yeah. So this bed that's in here, this portion of this in here, these little wells for mixing, they're actually silicone. They have a really nice weight and drag on the brush. They mix beautifully. It's a nice surface for mixing is what I'm trying to say. And then if you look on the other side of this, if you could zoom out, Todd, at the top, you have wells in here, which are, you know, that design was actually designed for you to be able to actually have some places to mix and utilize as wells. So that lid is not just bumpy on the surface as a design, but it has a purpose. Okay, so you have multiple places to mix. Okay, so that's your mini. What we'll do next is actually set up our workspace. I want to clear a little bit of my stuff out of the way. Watercolors are so wonderful in that if you make a little mess on your table, it's not such a big deal. You can wipe them off. But if you'd like to put down some paper or a little plastic or something like that, that's fine too. But we're just going to start with, I'm going to start with a paper towel for our next exercise. Paper towels are essential. You want to make sure you have those on hand. Just going to do it like this to keep my surface clean. And water is, of course, it's watercolor. I keep 2 containers and then a third backup. So I have a dirty water, a clean water, and then, you know, after painting a while, my clean water will get dirty. So I'll dump it in here, and then I keep a little extra in the back that I'll refill my clean water with. So I start with very little water in my container. You don't need a ton. And you can just keep cycling it so you have that clean water on hand. Paper towels, I just tear them down because I'm just going to be wiping my brush. Some folks like to keep actually even Q-tips on hand, but that's, anything that's absorbent will assist. Okay, so I'm all set up and ready to go. I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fill some pans. So what I'm going to show you here is that I can actually remove these little pans. So if I were to pinch a section, just pull up, those little guys come out, and they can go back in pretty easily. You just snap them back in. Not a big deal. That silicone's nice and stretchy and forgiving. So if you want to go ahead and take 2 pans out, it doesn't matter where they are in your set. Wherever you'd like to put them is fine. You can even move them around. It's up to you. But go ahead and take 2 of these little guys out. Okay. Now we're going to take one of your colors. It doesn't matter which one. It can be olive green is what I'm picking up. And we're going to pan this. Now, when I do this, I'm just going to fill my pan 3/4 of the way, because when I go to put this back in, I'm going to do it right away and it's going to be wet. If you wanted to, we're going to show a video in a moment. If you wanted to fill this pan and then let it sit for a few days to a week or so, depending on your environment, out, it'll actually dry and set up and it'll be a little more forgiving when you want to place them in your pan. So let me go ahead and do this. I'm just going to start in the corner. And you don't have to zoom in, Todd, because we're going to show the video in a moment. I'm just going to start in the corner and move from corner to corner, just trying to fill any air pockets that might be there, and gently squeeze my tube. And since I'm using this today, I'm not trying to fill that all the way up. I can go back and fill more. It's fine. There's some tricks to making sure that you get all the air pockets out. The video will show that in a moment. You can use a paper clip or a needle, just sort of move around and make sure you're getting coverage in that pan. So I'm going to go ahead and also do the Venetian red. Fill that little pan. Here we go. And pop it in here. And I'm all set. I'm ready to paint. So I'll give you a moment to do that. We'll go ahead and show the video. Here you go.
I have a question for you, Stacy.
Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of time that it takes for the paint to cure?
You mean to dry in the pan?
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on your environment. I mean, here, when I panned it the first time, when I was setting up for this event, we still had the heat on. It just took a few days. But I would say, generally it'd be about a week. Kathy, what do you think? What has been your experience? You can put that in the chat. But I'd say, it's not right away. It's a pretty thick application of watercolor, so it does take a little time. But once it's set up, when you re-wet this, you're not re-wetting all the way through. So it won't take as long once it's set up in your pan. So it'll behave more like a panned watercolor at that point. So
Yeah. Cool.
Few days, somebody else said. Yeah, my experience was a few days as well. But I wasn't in Florida, so I don't know. Maybe it takes longer in Florida. Okay, terrific. All right, so let's put this aside for a moment. Great question. We're going to talk a little bit about QoR, and then we're going to start painting, which I'm so excited to do. So I just want to show you this. This came with your set. It's a nice little handy, it's got a little brand information here, but it's a nice little handy color chart. So it's a nice quick reference. But the good news is this is actually out of date. because we just released 20 brand new colors for QoR, bringing us to a whopping 96 colors on the brand. So you see we have some new granulators in here. That cadmium purple is beautiful. If you are willing to work with the cadmium, we have all those interference colors. They're so exciting. Beautiful range. So lovely, lovely group of 20 to add to the palette. I'm super excited about that. So let's talk about QoR a little bit. QoR as a brand is a little different. QoR has a binder that's not gum arabic or honey, which is what's been used traditionally. We have a binder that is patented for our brand. Our brand is actually, we received a patent for QoR because it is unique. Aquazol, this particular material, was used in conservation for its clarity, its flexibility, its rewetting. It is a material that has been, way before we used it for paint, a real resource for conservators. And so when we decided we would try it as a binder and had success, we knew it was something special. We went ahead and made sure that this product was not only patented, but also compatible. It's something that's going to live on your palette and be okay. It's not something that has to have its own system only. It does play well with others. So when you have other watercolors or gouache, not necessarily acrylic gouache, but traditional gouache, anything that has a gum arabic or honey binder, it does really well with that as well. So I want to show you a few things. Todd, if you don't mind going overhead. This is an example of that, one of the attributes that make QoR special. So like I said, it was something that was used in conservation for quite some time before we made a paint out of it. That flexibility, that clarity, that rewetting that they liked made the paint have those attributes as well. So this is Aquazol and this is gum arabic. And you can see after time how different they are. Now, granted, you're never going to have this thick of an application of either in your paint. So our lab did a little test to just see how these binders do actually affect color. So I'm going to show you that in just a second here. Pull them up. Here we go. So you take a look at this example. You see this side of this paint out is a little grayer than this side. This is a Perylene violet. So it is a, if you're someone who follows pigment IDs, it's PV29. And it's the exact same pigment in all of these paint outs. This is our QoR formulation. Okay. This has binder, paint, and just another few little stabilizers and tweaks. This is, excuse me, binder, pigment, and a few other stabilizers. This is just pigment and binder. So there's no tweaking going on. But you can see how it behaves a little differently, but the color is still really lovely. When you get to this side, it's the exact same pigment because it all came from our lab with a gum arabic binder. And you can see the color difference. It's still lovely, but it's not as, it affects the chroma. It's not as full. And then this is with gum arabic and honey added to it. So there is a difference, which was interesting to see that test come from our lab. Thought it was pretty neat. Just FYI, this is paint in just dry on the dry paper. This is wet into wet on each one of these. Okay. All right. So by working with this synthetic binder, we do, we can control the stability a little bit more than if we were working with a natural resin. So that's been helpful as well. Actually, I'm going to wait on this. I'm going to jump to something else. So QoR, another thing we do at Golden is we test things a lot. So this is just here as a reference. I'm not going to go over this. I just want to call out something. Kathy's going to share a link in the chat. We have a landing page for this event that we made that has some of what I've already shared with you and some of what I will share with you. It's just technical information and a few of the videos, maybe that, not all of them, but a few of the videos that you've seen or will see today. So there's an article on lightfastness testing, and what we've done here at Golden, we've gone beyond what was required for ASTM. And what's interesting is the results were really good, and I think that it's a pretty revealing article if you want to take a look at that. So there's a link to that on the landing page, as well as the color chart I just showed you and a few other things. Okay. And I have to get that test back to the lab because that one is not mine. That is the test. One of the tests. Okay. And while you're painting, we have other tools that are out there. Before we get to the label, I'll do this one, Todd, and then we'll jump on the label. So just in case you're interested, there's other things on the shelf that you might see and wonder what they are. Watercolor medium. This is a medium that is very binder rich, meaning it has a lot of that aquazol. You can use it to make your own paint if you want, but as a medium, it extends your watercolor to have a more resinous and glossy appearance. So if you want to almost create glossier glazes and have a little bit more of a resinous feel as you move towards transparency, you can use that medium. By itself, it can remain a little sticky, so you can still add water to it. And I'm sure Kathy can, yeah, thank you, Kathy. She dropped a link on that information. This paint line is, with the exception of bone black, vegan. So our synthetic ox gall involved no animals. It is a synthetic, and it will help, like ox gall would, help in wetting out. So if you're working on Yupo or something like that, and you're finding that it's not wetting out, this will help. And then Lift Aid is a preparation that will assist in doing just that, lifting. So if you're working in a subtractive manner and you want to make sure that you're not staining as deeply. Oh, great question. I just saw that. What is wetting out? I'll explain. Let me finish on the wet aid, but good. We say things and we think everybody knows what we're talking about. No, great point. So the Lift Aid will just create a little barrier so it can lift a little easier if you're working subtractively. And there's information on this on that landing page. So you can pop over there too and get more. But wetting out means that, have you ever seen a surface where you put watercolor on it and it wants to bead up and it doesn't want to lay down and be nice? It just kind of like bunches up, beads up. We can add what is in this case, the ox gall will help it level out and not beat up. It'll want to be nice and lay down. That's wetting out. So it's a good explanation as any, right? Okay, so I hope that answered your question. Awesome, thanks. Good. Okay, good. I'm glad I can see the chat. I can't always see the chat. All right, you ready to start painting? I am. All right, I'll give you a moment. Let's go ahead and set you up. You'll probably want to have something on your table. If not, that's okay. Again, it's watercolor. It's very forgiving. Your palette. I'm going to use these Escoda travel brushes. I'm not here trying to be selling you Escoda, but they are really lovely. And they come in these pretty little tins. And I think we put that on the list. So if you wanted them, Plaza has that for you. But I'm going to use the biggest one. And part of the reason I can get away with that is because these brushes are really fine. They're going to come to a super nice tip. So I can actually have a nice full belly and then still get a very detailed fine point. If you use a smaller brush, you might find yourself going back and forth a little bit more while we work today, but that's fine too. It's pretty, isn't it? All right. So when we do this, before we get started, I want to point something out on the palette. Todd, if you could. There you go. So when oh, that looks great. When we go to fill your little card out, there's a corresponding letter on the palette that matches your card. It's a little hard to see in the silicone. So you see the benzimidazole yellow is A. And then as we move down to the Quin red, it's B. And I'll go through each one of these colors with you in a moment. But this is very helpful when you start to fill out the rest of your card later on. Just know those letters are there. And then this card can be a reference for you. You can even keep it in your palette. Because a lot of times these colors will look the same when they're dark, and you won't be able to distinguish which one is which. So this will really be a helpful little tool for you when we get going. So before we start painting it, I know we have folks that, all different levels of experience. So, I think, in my opinion, it doesn't matter how experienced you are. It's always nice to test drive a new palette. So, but some of the things I will go over, you may have heard before, you may be familiar with, or it might be new to you. Either way, stop me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to take just a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just going to, put a drop on each color, just a teeny drop, nothing crazy. You can do the same. Now the colors we just panned, I will do that as well, but they will wet out a lot faster because they're not dry. Now all of this wets out pretty quickly as compared to, some other watercolors. If you ever had to scrub and scrub and scrub a pan, you shouldn't feel like you're having to do that with QoR.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
I've noticed over the years that if I use denatured, or I mean distilled water, the distilled water creates much more brilliant colors than the normal tap water.
Well, distilled water doesn't have, the same. I can tell you, I have a well at my house, and I can fill a gallon of water with my water and let it sit, and I'll have rust at the bottom of my gallon in time. So distilled water will give you, there's less impurities. And I know that when we tell people that are mixing ahead, any dilutions, that distilled is the way to go. So it's quite possible that you're seeing the difference. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you. And I know Kathy will help in the chat as well. So, if I see anything pop up, I'll answer it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the benzimidazolone yellow. So I have these little swatch outs from another book, benzimidazolone yellow. We didn't go back to the label. We'll have to do that. Yeah, we'll go back to the label. You know what? Let me pause because I want to show you something before I get into this, before we start painting. So you're all set up. You can just leave this for a moment and let's go for a little ride. If you don't mind putting up there you go. So this is going to be helpful as we move forward. So before I referenced that we would look at the label, this is what I meant. So the tubes that you have are actually this old label on the left. And there was some information on there that was helpful, but we heard from artists, and what we heard was, hey, why don't you have this and why don't you have that on your label? And we thought, yeah, you're right. So we redesigned the label, and in the future, this is what they'll look like on the right. And the new label will have the color name. Color name sometimes correlates with the pigment and sometimes it does not. And that's for all brands. So if I have something that is called Venetian red, it could be the name of the pigment or it could not be. It could be a romance name, something like, I don't know, Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is a blend of multiple pigments. So we have the name, and then we have the Lightfastness rating. So I know you're going to be looking for those onesies and twosies there. And if you see the little sunshine and the number in there, it will tell you how great it is. Number 1 is the best. It's excellent. And 2s are very, very good. If you have any questions about how Lightfastness ratings work, I have the article on the landing page, but there's also more in our Just Paint publication. So you can dig in if you're interested. Pigment ID number, that's important because that's the true color. So whatever we call it, anybody calls their paint, the pigment ID is going to tell you really what that pigment is. So I could call a color, French blue number 7, but if the pigment is something else, then it's whatever the pigment is because the name is subjective. So opacity, transparency, you can see if it's blacked out, the shades it's nighttime, it's opaque. If you have it a totally open box that's transparent, and then you can deduct the rest there. These are also important indicators for watercolorists. Is it staining, granulating? So strong staining will be a solid circle. Semi-staining will be a half, and granulating will have a G. which is something when I show you these swatches, you'll see that in a moment. Then it'll have our patent and our binder, which is Aquazol. So thank you for that, Todd. I hope that's informative, and that key is actually on the landing page as well. So if those are things you're interested in, when you actually go to buy your paint, you have a little bit of a sense of what you're looking at. So this is a semi-stainer, and it's semi-transparent. And you can see here in the full chromatic, it's, very high chroma, and the undertone has this nice glow. So we're going to go ahead and do that now on your swatch card. Now we're going to actually paint. So I pick up a little water on your brush, just a teeny bit, and get that paint moving. You'll see right away you get paint on your brush. You don't have to scrub hardly at all. That's that Aquazol at work. And what I would recommend is to just do about a quarter of this with just that mass tone of just full on color. And of course, you're going to do this your way, and it's yours. It's beautiful. But it might be nice to see the undertone. So what I'm going to do now is clean my brush. I'm going to wipe it here. A little cleaning again. Now I'm going to just pick up some clear water. And I'm going to go right up to this, and I'm just going to go like that. Wipe my brush again. Pick up a little more clear water. And just pull that down so I can see the undertone. If I want, I can go back in and add some more at the top. It's fine. Now I see a gradation. So when I'm looking at this color, I'll see not only the mass tone, just that full saturated color, I'll see that undertone, that pretty glow. So you guys can paint along if you like. Next, we're going to do quinacridone red, which is a strong stainer and transparent and cool. It's a nice, pretty red with those nice flowers that are, we have spring here, just starting up upstate, really starting to blossom. I'm going to do this quinacridone red. Same way.
We have a great question about how to use the undertone.
So in painting, how to use this light undertone. Oh gosh, in watercolor, it's so much about the play of water versus paint. So it's like you have this whole gradient of color possibilities. So if you're working on a painting and you want pink and you have red in your palette, you can just add more water. You don't have to add white if you're working on a white surface. If you are glazing, which is you're adding transparent color on top of other color to change a temperature or to adjust color, you can do that with this undertone, by just adding more water. This just gives you a sense of what the range of that color possibility is on its own over white. Some artists will do color tests where they'll actually take, strips of other colors. They'll take, say, a strip of the yellow and a strip of the red and a strip of the blue, and then when they dry, take a flat brush and do a dilute wash of a color across all three to see how that glaze, that addition of a dilute color on top can change the temperature. I hope is that answering the question?
It does a great job, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on now to cobalt blue. This color is very special. They're all special. We love all our colors, but this one is a kind of a workhorse in this palette. It is a semi-opaque color, semi-staining, but it also granulates. So when we're thinking about an urban landscape, and there's a lot of texture sometimes in any landscape, this gives you texture in your paint. So that granulation is what those little speckles are here. Todd, could you zoom into that? Or your close-up camera? There, thank you. So you can see how there's like little speckles in here. That little texture is the granulation. And you'll see more of that when we go to paint. You'll notice the difference. Thanks, Todd. Okay, so we're going to start with that one. So you have a cobalt blue. Go ahead and paint that one out. Rinse the brush. Maybe take some of that paint off. There we go. A little fresh water. Again, I'm going to remove some water from my brush, get more water. Just come right to this edge. There we go. And this time I'm not going to put any water. And I can even remove, if you put too much, you can remove a little bit. There we go. Nice. That's your cobalt blue. And the next one is cobalt teal. This is a favorite color for a lot of people. Raise your hand if you are familiar with cobalt teal. All right. Here we go. Cobalt teal. Cobalt teal is also, just like cobalt blue, a semi-opaque, semi-staining, and granulating color. So again, adding that texture in and giving you these beautiful chromatic possibilities. So when we get to mixing, you'll see how lovely this color can be. So again, whoops, too much water. If you do that, it's okay. You have paper towel too, you can remove some. There we go. There we go. All right, cobalt teal, nice. Okay, E, which is the next one, is our Van Dyke brown. It's a warm brown that actually will be a wonderful workhorse in our palette. You can see I'm pointing here to E. That's it. Thanks, Todd. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. A little bit more paint. There we go. Now this one you'll see is rated as semi-transparent, which if you've noticed, I've gone back a few times to add color. It's because it's semi-transparent. It is a stainer and a granulator, and you'll see when you start to wash this out, because it is a darker color, you'll really see those granulating marks. You can see it on my dry example as well. Yeah, it's a beautiful addition to the palette. There you go. See it, this dry one, you can see a little texture in there. That granulating. There you go. Thanks, Todd. That's great. All that yummy granulation. It's nice. Okay, next one in your palette, Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is a really pretty bluish gray. It is a blended color. If you see here, it's PB15, PBK7, PV19. So it's actually 3 pigments. We go single pigment as much as possible, but sometimes a color like Payne's Gray, which has traditionally been a blend, just is. That's how you get it. All right. Now this is a real dark one, so when you go to wash it down, you might have to almost remove some paint. See, I have my little handy paper towel right here, so I'm not putting too much water on. There we go. I'm gonna let the water pull it into the undertone. Nice. How are we doing? Great. Okay. So depending on where you put your little pans that we made today, you can look for the letter that correlates with your placement, and we can choose the square that matches, or you can move them later. I actually have mine at G and H, so that just continues this way. So my G here is the Venetian red, which I have to tell you, I found a building in Venice that was Venetian red, but by the time the sun bleaches all those ancient buildings, the Venetian reds are so varied. It's really lovely. If you do go to the post on Instagram, I did the mixes with this palette and Venetian red, so you have those capabilities as well. Okay, so I am gonna just put my brush in here. You see how wet that is? It's because it didn't dry up yet. So what I'm gonna do is still add a tiny bit of water to that. But just a little bit, and I don't need much because it's still quite wet right out of the tube. There we go. I'm actually gonna get a little bit more water on my brush, get that moving. It's gonna feel a little different because it's right out of that tube. Now, what you can do is go over here, pick up some of this paint, put it over here with a little bit of water just to get it a little less resinous. There we go. It's loosey-goosey now. And I can just scoot. There we go. It's not going to dry up. I got a dry brush technique there a minute ago. There we go. So is my head in the screen? Great. I had to really lean into that one. All right. So I'm going to grab some clean water. And now start to pull this down. The Venetian red is an opaque color, which is, it's going to behave more like a gouache. It's really opaque. And it's also very staining. So when I do this undertone, if I can get there, there we go. A little too much water. There we go. You'll see that it can have that really pretty staining effect as well. Nice. Last one. Switch my paper towel. There we go. This is olive green. Olive green is a semi-opaque staining granulator. So it's got a lot of goodies happening here. Again, I'm going to pick some up actually and put it in my well. It's still a little sticky, and add a little water. So if you're working with a tubed watercolor, you do it just like this. I'm going to go ahead and just make my mark across the top. Rinse that out. And now I'm going to pull this down. Great. There, and you can see that it's starting to granulate already. All right. Nice. See some of you still painting. That's great. All right. So while we're wrapping up that, before we move into color mixing, I thought I would open you up for questions. Were there any questions, Lauren?
Let's see. Sorry, I actually opted to participate. So.
Oh, you're painting. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your painting.
No, it's okay. There are a few questions here. So we do have, how do we get, oh, that's the giveaways. I can answer that. The giveaway, I will share the link to the giveaway in the chat.
Oh, the yellow. Right here.
There you go. Yeah.
Benzimidazolone yellow. Say that backwards 3 times. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Benzimidazolone yellow. It's PY 154, Lightfastness 1, great color. And it'll warm up this palette. So anything that's too cool for you, this will just give it a nice shot of sunshine. Okay.
Susan is asking what causes the texture. She says that out of the tube it's stringy, rather like melted mozzarella.
Yeah, so that's great. And actually, Kathy's got a note there. I mean, there's a little stickiness to it that's expected, but if yours is like super stringy, one of the things that we do is our team, if something doesn't feel right, I can show you mine. I'll actually squeeze out mine and we'll look at it. But if something doesn't feel right, like you did this, like I've been painting, this just seems so strange. You can always call our team. We have a product guarantee. So if something's out of spec, it's not right, we replace it, which is pretty amazing. So, but we'll take your picture, we'll take a look at it, we'll see if it's in spec. Tubed watercolors can range in their viscosity, how they feel. Aquasol has a certain feel that a gum arabic may not. So a little bit of that, when you were seeing me pick up with my brush, the sort of resinous feeling is fine. If it's like gooey, stringy, goobery, icky, then it's not fine. Would you agree with that, Kathy? I'll see what she says. Kathy will chime in. But that was a great question. So if you're not sure, help@goldenpaints.com and we will walk you through it. Oh, so at this time we don't sell individual pans. Stacy, I agree. Thank you. We don't sell the individual pans at this time. But you can fill those with any tube color you have or want, even gouache, as long as it's not an acrylic-based product. I know that some folks do sell pans, other companies do, but we don't at this time. Yeah. Okay. Great. You want to do some color mixing? This is where it gets fun. Okay, well, more fun. This was fun. All right, so let's go ahead and do some color mixing and transition our setup. So we're going to need a little bit more space because you're going to be working on some watercolor paper and the grounds that we provided for you. If you happen to have printed any of the imagery, that's great. If not, no big deal. We are going to start with an image, this image. So Todd, if you can put that on screen for a minute. There you go. We'll be matching a lot of these cementuous colors, and Payne's gray is not it. So even though we have a gray in the palette, that's not going to get you to this. So we'll talk about neutralizing a little bit. I see the question about what colors you would add to the palette, and I'm going to let Kathy play around with that. I think really that is so dependent on what you're trying to do. If I have a cool red, I might add a warm red. If I have I have a couple of blues, I might be good in that category. I might add a really transparent warm color. I think that really depends. If I had the interference or iridescent colors, I might add them, just depending on what you want. But Kathy can maybe, play around with that if you have anything, Kathy. I know it's very subjective, but fun question. All right, so let's go ahead and play. I have a dry example of some of the mixtures we're going to do here, and I intentionally didn't do flat washes because I wanted you to see the gradients and possibilities with these color mixtures. So we're going to go through this together. If you want to go ahead and get your sheet of paper ready, if you have this, it can be, maybe tucked under. I have my mini over here, and we're going to start with neutrals, creating some neutrals, because if you're looking at the landscape, you're going to have neutrals. That's just how it is. And if I'm in the city, I'm definitely going to have some concrete. So just to show you Payne's gray quickly on the side here, Payne's gray alone, you just swatched it out, is this sort of blue gray. It's really, it might get you close to some of these, but it might be a little too blue, to be honest. So we're going to mix some color to get you there. See, this is Payne's gray. It's very cool. So I could add some warm colors to that. I can try to neutralize that. That's one option, but I have some things that'll get you very close to that. So if we start with our cobalt blue, and if you can go ahead and take a nice, really scrub into that cobalt blue, really load up your brush, and go ahead and just make a little mark so you know what color you've used, and give yourself a nice healthy swatch of cobalt blue. Maybe pick up some water and create a wash. Pick up some more water, create some more. Just keep diluting that out like that. Okay. Then almost right after that, before it gets too soaked into your paper, you're going to grab that Van Dyke brown. Also saturate your brush. Just load it up. That Van Dyke brown. Just make a little mark here. And now I'm going to grab a little bit more water. I'm going to put that brown there, and I'm going to see what happens when I come down with my brown and it starts to play with my blue. You can clean some of my brush. Maybe take a little off if it's too much. You'll see you're starting to change that color. And at some point, that's really going to start to gray out and neutralize. If it's too dark of a gray, I can add more water. Create a wash, a neutral wash. Now you can mix this in your pan. I can do this over here and create a color, test it on my paper, and then have that color just to go, you know, a big flat wash of a color. So, you know, you don't have to wing it. You can actually mix it and have it. But for this exercise, I thought it'd be just nice for you to experience what the color can do. So when this dries, if you take a look at, you know, this range is doing the same thing. I may have had a bit more blue in this one. Here it's a little warmer. You're going to get that range. I also have a swatch here of cobalt blue and Van Dyke brown, just in different ratios. So this is a little more blue, this is a little more brown. And if I hold this up to my image, you can see I'm getting into this range of color that I'm seeing in here. Okay, so depending on how much brown and how much blue I put in that mixture, I can really start to get into the family of these colors that you're seeing in this cement wall. Now, if I were to take the quinacridone red and the teal and mix that, I'm going to get something much more chromatic. But I also see a little bit of, you know, little highlights of that in here. So, you know, you could mix something that would play in there maybe with this using your red and your teal. All right, let's do another one. Now there's some sandy kind of warmer colors in here too. Oh, that's not on screen. Let me pull it down. So like these colors, these sort of warmer, sort of a little bit greener, cementuous colors, almost sandy. It's got a little yellowish cast, as opposed to these that are more blue-violet. So let's try another neutral. We're going to take the cobalt teal. Same thing. I'm going to make a little mark. Let me move this up here. And I'm going to take that loaded brush. You can load that guy up. There we go. Get some more water. Just keep pulling that down. Give yourself a nice wash to work with. Going back to that Van Dyke brown, pick up quite a bit of that. Make a little mark. Same thing. If you find you have too much brown, just take some off, which is what I just did. You'll see it start to green and gray as you pull down. Get some more water. And you can just play with those ratios and see what you get. As I create more washes, and I use that white of the paper, I can start to see these, you know, beigey, sandy tones emerge. So this is a really lovely way to get some of those warmer, sandier colors. There we go. If I need to be warmer, I can be warmer. Now you can also mix all three. And I'll show you what that looks like. This is optional for you. If you want to try it, you can. You can go here. And do this like this. And really, you know, when you get to working on your palette, These things sort of get in the same vicinity. You know, just be a little slight temperature difference between the two, depending on your ratios. They all play well together to create those lovely neutrals. You can see there's there's a variety of different tones in here. Now, I could also take my Venetian red. Another mixture is take my Venetian red. So go ahead and make a little dot here. You can follow along with me on this one. Pick up some water. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the others. Take a, quite a bit of paint at the beginning and then wash it down. Up a little more. There we go. And the next color I'm going to choose is actually going to be the teal again. Teal. Swatch that teal right next to it. And then I'm going to start to blend them. Add a little more water. There we go. And we're getting a gray again. So we're after that. That's what we're after, right? So there's so many different grays in that source image that if you continue to neutralize with these different options, you can change those temperatures. Somebody's got their mic on.
Hold on one second. I think I muted Stacy.
Are we good?
Yes.
Awesome. So you can see how some of the tones that we just mixed could be pulled out of this image. Okay. There you go. All right. So we're going to do one more thing while we're here with this resource, working with grays. Are there any questions while I transition to the last exercise with grays? Neutrals? No? Okay. Sounds good. All right. So this offers another tool. If you have one of these watercolor ground cards, it'd be a good time to pull that forward. We're going to paint on that. Watercolor ground is an acrylic, an absorbent acrylic ground that actually allows you to paint on acrylics. So this ground will bind to anything that acrylics will bind to. So canvas, plexiglass, wood. You can put it on paper as well if you want. But it has its own characteristics. So when we prep these samples, they go on an absorbent surface and you can see that there's some brush strokes. If you wanted to utilize this material without brush strokes, you would just dilute it a little bit more or reduce the absorbency of your surface by putting, like a gesso or something on it. So those brush strokes, though, if you like them, will telegraph through your paint and create an additional texture, which can be lovely as well. So what I'm going to do is give you a moment to just choose a couple of combinations of grays and try them on this and imagine how that might influence the sort of cementuous effect in a painting. I'm going to go ahead and use a Payne's gray, a cobalt and Van Dyke, cobalt blue and Van Dyke, and a cobalt teal and Van Dyke brown on mine. But you can choose any combination that you want. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I think Kathy put a little note about watercolor ground. Thank you, Kathy. So this is my Payne's gray. Remember we talked about wetting out? If you see this like sort of bunch up, it's not wetting out. So just give it a little scrub and then it'll start to wet out a little bit more. It's almost like a paper that's got a lot of sizing on it. There we go. And then the next one is, I'm going to do the cobalt blue. With the Van Dyke brown. A little more. My clean water is getting dirty. It's time to empty that out. Replace it. Brown. Mhm. Fun that is. These textures are going to be really pretty when they dry between the granulation and the absorbency of this panel. Okay, and the last one I'm doing is the cobalt teal. I didn't mix that, which I kind of think is fun. And the Van Dyke brown. Sorry about my hand, everybody. A little too much brown, so I'm gonna add some more teal. There we go. It's all about, it's like baking. A little of this, a little of that. Got to get the proportions right. There we go. I wanted to get a kind of sandy color. All right. Nice. How did that feel? It's different than paper. It's really got it's another tool in the toolbox. Okay, so do you want to take a moment to switch? We're going to switch to another set of mixtures, and then I'll answer some questions. You have any questions, everybody?
Looks like Kathy's answering a lot of them, so we're good.
Kathy, that's awesome. I mean, you can always, if there's anything that comes up, Lauren, that has to do with what I'm doing, you can jump in. Okay. Also, just real quick, just so you know, these grounds can actually be tinted with color. So I'm just going to take random color here. I'm going to take the quinacridone red and just show you how that'll influence it. So here's the quinacridone red up here, just on white. And so if I were able to make my own colored ground, I could take that red, and it's a bit warmer if you notice on that brown, I mean, excuse me, that kind of ochre color here. I think it's a transparent oxide, yellow oxide. So that's an acrylic color mixed with the acrylic watercolor ground that I'm able to paint watercolor on. To me, that gets pretty exciting because it opens up a lot of different possibilities. Now, if if this isn't your bag, paper can be exciting too. But this just FYI, it doesn't always have to be white. Okay. The next one we're going to look at is this packet right here. I'm going to have this brick scene, and we're going to mix some lovely warm colors and some sky colors from our palette. Do you have that one, Todd? You can throw up on the screen? Great. And you also will have another little acrylic ground. It's the light dimensional ground. The one that feels spongy is the one we're going to work with. Okay. Let's see. I think I'm ready here. All right, nice. So we have some really pretty steely blue grays. You saw some of that in our previous mixture. So when I had pulled out this teal and quinacridone red, I mean, that's almost right on it. So that mixture is going to get you very close to the piping that we see here, this galvanized piping. And then we have this sort of juicy red. It's almost that cool red on the roof. So as you can imagine, this quinacridone red would be great in that area. But these oranges are varied, this brick. So we'll look at the brick and we'll look at the sky in our mixtures as well. So this is quinacridone red and teal. If you want to try it off to the side, you know, you can do that. It's up to you. But I just want to show that's just a 2-color mixture, and it does some wonderful things. Okay. So here's
We
the,
do have a question here, and I don't know if it was answered earlier.
Yep.
Oh, Kathy just answered it. It was a ground tinted with watercolor or acrylic, but it was tinted with a bit of acrylic.
yes.
you,
And
Kathy.
you know, here's the thing is you don't want to put too much acrylic paint with your grounds if you're going to do that, because if there's a lot of glossy acrylic paint in that ground, it can really change the absorbency. So if you wanted to go from a white ground to like a super dark gray, and you're going to put a lot of a black acrylic or a dark acrylic in there, you know, you might be better off working with a different material. But if you're just putting a few drops of a strong color like the transparent oxide, yellow oxide, that's a pretty strong, or an India yellow. Those are very strong colors. A few drops of that shouldn't change the absorbency, and it can give you the color you need. So if you ever have any questions about that, you can, you know, do some little tests, but just don't add a ton of color. You're not, you know, you want to keep the ratio mostly ground. Okay. But you'd be surprised how much certain colors are very strong, like a phthalo blue. One little drop of phthalo blue, you know, takes over the whole neighborhood. Okay. So when I looked at these bricks, I thought, oh my gosh, like I have 50 million different colors in here, and we've got in our palette red and yellow, but red and yellow is not going to make that. And I have Venetian red, which is great. It's going to get close, but it's still not going to make all of these variations. So just playing with a few variations to get what is a common color in the urban landscape. So just to show you what the red and the yellow look like, and apparently my brush was a little dirty here because my yellow is much more chromatic, sorry, reach over, much more chromatic than that. So the red and the yellow here, you know, you're just going to get a lovely orange, and that's nice. No to have that. But what happens when we want to get a little warmer? So let's look at those options. We'll start with that. So we'll go to our paper here, and I've got my bricks here. I'm going to actually go over to my Van Dyke, just to show you. Take my Van Dyke brown, and I'm going to make a little mark with that. Pick up a little water. Just going to create a little wash of Van Dyke brown. There we go. Just a little, just to show the variation there. And I'm going to pick up some of my benzimidazzolone yellow. Now that's a pretty warm color as it is. So I'm going to mix that a little bit. But you can see it's not really orange. I can mix maybe a little bit more, and I'll get warmer, but it's still going to, you know, not really be orange. I might be able to get some of these funny little, here, if I can pop up, some of these funny little tones in the rust right up in here. Actually, Todd, could you go back to that close-up camera? I'll come to you. Yeah. So as you see this like funny little yellow cast, these are the things when painting that'll drive you crazy, because you're like, I got this color, but I can't get that transition. It's just, you know, that little glow in there. That's what this is right here. That's this color, right? So that was that little bit of glow underneath that rust. Well, let's try to get closer to the rust. So when we develop this urban landscape palette, we can get there by mixing several of these colors, but a faster route would be to take some of this Venetian red. Again, it's fresh, so I'm going to mix it with some water up here. There we go. Take some of that Venetian red. And again, it's an opaque color, but I can still do a wash with it. There we go. It'll be a stainer now. And then I'm going to take some of the yellow, the benzimidazzolone yellow. I really clean my brush here. It's gotten pretty dirty. Grab some yellow. That was yellow too there. And I'm going to pull that down. Get a little bit more water. Now I'm going to mix. And you see how that starts to warm up that Venetian red a little bit. So I can start to see that I can get a variety of different, from the sort of cooler, almost pinky undertones here to this really nice warm orange. It starts to get closer to these colors in here. Again, depending on how opaque, I can actually, vary this. I don't have to always use a wash. I can gauge my opacity and the amount of water by mixing in my pan. So I'm going to do that just to show you, because we've done everything in a wash. I'm going to actually mix in my pan right here. Add some water. Are you able to see this? I'll pull it over here. There we go. So if I'm trying to cover a big area and I'm not painting like this, I can mix my color here and then come back and just swatch it out. See, is that my color? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe I need to add a little more of this or a little more of that, right? You can just keep changing it. And you have all of this to work with on your pan. So Venetian red is very, very strong. And so if you are mixing, you're just going to want a little, you saw when I picked it up, I used the tiniest bit on the tip of my brush. Some colors are going to be quite strong and some are going to be a little, more sensitive. The cobalt teal is pretty sensitive, and you may have noticed that already. You had to keep going back and adding more. Okay. So let's talk about the blues of the sky. You can see that some of this is almost a little violet or grayish, and then in here we're almost right on the cobalt. So let's take a look at some blues. I could take the cobalt. Let's just swatch that out. I'm going to move this back over here. We'll swatch out the cobalt, and I'm going to do a little wash with that cobalt. Coming this way. Then I'm going to pick up a bit of the teal. Put that next to it. Clean this out. Do a little wash of that teal. Lost some of it. There we go. And in here, I can actually get them together. Pull that out as well. And I can see that I slightly changed the temperature of my blue as I come around. So depending on where the sun is and how the light is hitting, you can change that temperature of your blue. Now I think this sky is pretty close to a cobalt blue as is, but I might want to get a little of this sort of violet gray in the cloud into my painting. So if I were to use this cobalt blue, and pull in a little bit of quinacridone red over here. Now quinacridone red's pretty strong. It's a quin. They're tough cookies. Look how much color I'm getting out of that. I don't need much. This is why we're mixing like this, to show you proportionality. Okay, keep pulling that water out. Look how pink that still is, right? So I can now go back to I'm cleaning my brush in between. Here we go. I'm going back to my blue, and I'm going to grab some water. I'm going to pull this blue around. Let's see, when I start to hit that red and I get those violet colors, they're really lovely violet. And I can even, pull that wash and see how much water do I need to get the really light color that I would see in these clouds. Right, so I'm pretty close. Let me move up. I'm pretty close in here. So let's just, for fun, go back to the blue, kind of hold it up. I'm starting to feel a little like I'm painting soon. Starting to make that sky come to life. Okay. All right. Good times. I like color mixing. I think it's a wonderful way to get to know your palette. And now you're going to get to do all magical things with this mini. All right, so before we jump off of this palette, let's just do a couple on your light dimensional ground. I had done 4 on here. I'm not going to do 4 now. I'm just going to do Venetian red. I'll do the Van Dyke brown. Actually, I'll do Venetian red. That's what this is. I'll do Venetian red and yellow. And then I think I'll just change this one up to be the violet for fun. You can do whatever you like. I think the point here is to experience this ground. It's really different than the last one. It's actually, I'm going to use this mixture that I had before that we did. Use that. You'll notice that it has a really different feel. It adds a lot of texture. It's got these like little, it's spongy, so you can see how the paint wants to deposit in this texture. I happen to really love that. Pick up some. It's one of my favorite grounds. But it is it's unique. Really interesting. Light dimensional ground. So I could, here's see that palette knife mark? I don't know if you have it on yours, but when they apply these, they apply them with a palette knife. You can apply it in a way that it doesn't have that mark and it's super smooth by scraping it thinner. But you can also build this up as thick as like, like cupcake frosting if you want, and still paint on it. It's really amazing. It can be sculptural watercolor if that's the direction you want to go, which could be loads of fun. Okay, so I'm going to take now Venetian red. I'm going to say this is. How are we doing on time?
Good. It's 2:23. I did have a couple questions if we have a good spot for those. Just to see, we might have to call them to unmute to clarify. But so Eugenia asked, I think what she's trying to ask is why is there no black and white included? I'm assuming she's talking about this particular set of colors.
Mm-hmm. Well, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, and Eugenia, if you need to unmute to clarify, please do.
Well, I can say that, and you can interrupt me if you're working on muting and you just haven't gotten there yet. So you can always add black and white to your palette, but typically the white is the white of the paper, but not always. Sometimes folks like to mix in a white, especially like gouache painting. People who work in gouache, you use opacities and white all the time, and we know artists that will use like our Chinese white in the upper layers. So, but typically your white is the white of the paper, and the black is typically mixed by neutralizing other color. But that doesn't mean you have to. We sell black and we sell white. We just thought if you only get so many colors in the palette, what's the biggest range we can give you? And by adding the black and white, we take away some of the chromatic range. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah. I paint mostly in enamel paint. And
Okay.
yeah, and I use white for almost everything, and I
Yeah.
use black for almost everything. Like anytime I need to make something darker, it's black. Anytime I have to just do it's white. It's not usually other colors together. No, this is neat.
Oh,
I was
good.
just, yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I was just curious.
It's a really different way of thinking from enamels, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's really different. Now
Yeah.
we're getting kind of close on time. So what I'm going to do is actually we're going to do these mixtures on your little fiber paste panels. Well, fiber pastes are actually it's the cold pressed ground, but just a little so you know. In golden acrylics, we make a product very similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's called fiber paste. So if you can't get the QoR Grounds in your market, and you can't get this cold press ground, you can use a product called fiber paste. It just won't have as much titanium white. It won't be as bright as this, but it can be a support as well. But this is the QoR cold press watercolor ground. And if you look at my example here, you can see how this one, which is the roughest one, and it will like check your brushes a little bit, so be delicate. It creates a beautiful texture. So what we'll do is we'll do a couple of mixtures. I think probably if we were going to conserve our time, I would like to focus on the teal and benzimidazzolone to get those really super juicy brights. We'll swatch out the olive that you have, which is going to create a nice granulating, sort of more neutral green. It's not going to be so overwhelming. And we'll also do the cobalt and the benzimidazzolone on here as well. So let's go ahead and do those three, and it shouldn't take us too long. So we'll go ahead and pop over to this fiber paste pan, excuse me, I keep saying fiber paste, this this QoR watercolor ground, which you also know you can use the golden fiber paste, but this cold press, it's called cold press because it visually mimics a cold press paper, like a cold press handmade, thick paper. It's not going to behave the same way, so don't feel like you're going to get cold press paper out of it. It's still going to have a different feel, but it is definitely going to give you that beautiful visual texture. Okay, so let's start with an easy one. We'll start with the yellow and the teal, and we're going to do this like we did the other ones, but on this panel, and you'll definitely feel a difference. My paint needs a little more water. I don't know about you guys, but we've been painting for a little while. So I'm going to add that in there. There we go. So this is my benzimidazzolone yellow. I'm going to make my mark so I don't forget what I did. I'm going to make a nice little pile of it up here. Now that texture might require that you put a little bit more paint. And then I'm going to just drag this down. There we go. And now I'm going to grab the teal, make a little note, put this here, and see what I get when I mix them. Get that really bright spring green. We have that color around us now in upstate New York. It is that green. And the sun shines. It's so pretty. So I have now, we've already mixed these colors, right? We've gotten some grays. We've seen how to neutralize. I could mix those neutrals with some of the oranges we made. And now, I made some of those sandy colors, creating the washes, and now I'm getting the green. So I almost can build this entire painting. So if you wanted to later, you could paint this. You have all the color and you know how to do it. Okay. Next one is going to be the same yellow. So we're going to take our benzimidazzolone yellow again. Let's try it now with the cobalt blue and see the difference. I'm going to put this down here. Great, pull this down. Grab some cobalt blue. Put that in there, wonderful. And you'll notice right away, it's a different green. It's just a little darker. It's a little sappier. A different green. Now I can change the temperature. I could add more blue, add more yellow, and so on, but it's just got a different personality. So that gives me some of those shadowy greens, some of those greens that you'll see that are just like, they're tucked in. Now I have some greens in here that are really warm and almost gray. I'm going to go to this beautiful olive green that we put in the pan today. I'm just going to pick that up, just swatch out olive green. Now you can see how that is in your painting, in that image, that reference image. If I were to make this as a painting, I could see right away some spots I would put it in. And I'm going to wash that too. There we go. How'd that feel? What's really neat is when these granulating colors dry, you can really see how the granulating pigments will work in with these grounds as well. And they'll get this really pretty sort of like cascading texture. It's really nice. All right. So that was a mixing marathon. And it was a lot of fun to do that with you. I have maybe I can take some questions, some requests. I know there was a question about washing and using transparencies. And now I have a bunch of dried examples. So if you want, I can do a wash and show you how that layers really quickly. And then we can start to wrap up with some questions. Sound good? Now,
I do have just one. So, sorry, Jessica. Can you just clarify what the grounds and how they were provided in the sample kit? They should have labels on the back, right?
They
For
should.
what the boards are.
Yeah, did you get your sample kit?
Yeah, everyone should have them.
Yeah.
If you could just explain how the
Sure.
textures, how they're different.
Yeah. Oh,
how
I
they
see
were
what you mean.
prepared.
Do a little review real quick. I got you. I got you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
thank you.
No problem. So just to show you, this says QoR on the back. Mine's all dirty now. QoR cold press ground. And it gives you a little description. So the name should be on the back. Cold press ground is very textured. It feels a little rougher. It's meant to mimic the look of a cold press watercolor paper, but it's an acrylic product. So it can go on any surface that an acrylic would, opening up, new possibilities for watercolor. And then this one is called light dimensional ground. Light dimensional ground has a different feel and a different texture that will telegraph through your paint. So when you look at these two side by side, can you try zooming in? Yeah. We'll try. Or if you could just use the other camera, the little tight camera. Okay, good. I'll work with this. There we go. So there we go. If you take a look at these two side by side here, I know we're really up close. You can see with this one, it really kind of looks pulpy. And that's the cold press ground. This one, let me see if I can do it, is actually, oops, that was in the wet paint. It's spongy. Did you see a little dent? And then it goes back.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's light molding paste. It's light because it's actually physically light. It's got air, kind of air in that system. So if I wanted to do a gigantic painting on panel, let's say 6 feet by 12 feet on a canvas or a panel, and I wanted it to be watercolor, I could coat that surface with either of these, the light molding paste version, which is our light dimensional ground. This is another product that if you can't find the QoR, there is golden, something similar, which would be light molding paste. But the light dimensional ground is going to give you the absorbency you need, but it's not going to weigh as much. So this one will be heavier physically, and the light dimensional ground, because of that air in the system, will be physically lighter, and it has a different texture, a slightly different texture. It looks more like doppled or stippled or something. And then the watercolor ground, you can zoom in on this one too. Remember I mentioned that this one, the streaks are due to the application. You can actually do an application without the brush strokes as predominant. But this is a very thin coating. It's like a thin gesso ground. It's not going to have the textural build of the others. The others can be put on very thinly and not as textured, or they can be extremely textured, whereas the watercolor ground is going to be more of a traditional flat kind of surface. It just has a lot of absorbency, and your paint just behaves a little differently on it than it does on paper. So it gives you another tool to work with. Also can go on any surface that acrylics can go on. So was that helpful?
Great.
Awesome.
I thought that was very helpful. Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, that was a nice suggestion. Thank you. Okay, so I made a little, I have my brush is a little small. I'd kind of probably do better with a flat brush, but I'm going to use the side of this one. Made a very dilute quinacridone red, like pink color. And I'm just going to swatch over this very quickly, just to show you how a glaze can change the temperature. There we go. And if you go back and forth, you'll activate your paint underneath. So when you do this, it's really just a simple, 1, 2. You don't want to overdo it. That's a good one. You can really see it there. All righty. Any more questions? Put me on camera. Thank you. Any more questions?
I believe so.
Great.
I think Dawn has a question here. Does watercolor disrupt the surface of the cold press ground after it is painted over, or does the surface stay pretty much intact? I found that the watercolor ground will hold metal point, and I'm wondering if it could be painted on and keep the tooth for metal point to be laid over. Oh, that's, yeah, like
Ooh,
a
I love that
mixed
idea.
media.
It does keep the tooth. I would love to see you try it and hashtag share with Golden and let us know you did that, because that would be, I would assume it, I mean, you would have to put a lot of watercolor paint on that for it not to have the tooth. And does it disrupt the surface? So if that's what you mean, does the paint fill the surface to where it no longer has a tooth? It would take, I would think, quite a bit before you would get, if you're not doing a lot of layers and building up a lot of paint, I think that's maybe the factor that would be at play there. Obviously, the paint, the ground itself, once it's dried and cured, it's not going anywhere because it's acrylic. I think you're just mostly concerned with the tooth being filled and losing the absorbency. So I think it has to do with the ratio of amount of paint that you put on that surface. And Kathy, if you have any other thoughts, you can drop that in the chat as well. But, you saw how thin we were working with little washes. It doesn't, I'm not caking this on. So I bet that would be a beautiful technique. Now you have some paint. So I'd love to see that. That's exciting.
Great, thank you. I know we're a little over, so I think that's great. And I know you said you have a resource if anyone has other questions about the products. Can you give that contact info again?
Oh, yes. Anytime you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Kathy's on the team of folks that would answer, and Kathy's actually our watercolor specialist. So I was happy to have her join us today. So it's help@goldenpaints.com, and it's on your screen right now. We also have a 1-800 number. So yep, there it is. Well, that's our, without the 1-800, you can call that number as well. But go to our website. There's also the contact information at our website, but help@goldenpaints is easy to remember. Okay. All
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you so much, Stacy. This was really great. I had fun. I couldn't help but participate myself. So
oh, good.
Hope to have you again. And thank you all for joining us today. Hope to see you on the next one. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.